Hey book dragons, welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about my practices as a minimalist booktuber. Here we go. So I've mentioned a few different times on my channel that I am a minimalist. And you may be thinking, well, it's kind of weird, how can you be both a minimalist and a booktuber? Because obviously, if you're a booktuber, you read books and you review books, and so you probably own lots of books, right? And so we're going to be talking about that a little bit. It's not just an oxymoron to be a minimalist booktuber. It can actually be done. And so I did a Q&A request on my Discord channel. And speaking of, if you have not signed up for my Discord yet, what are you waiting for? Find the link in the description below. But I did a request for questions on my Discord channel, and I got quite a few really good ones. So I am going to be doing a Q&A later on in the video regarding minimalism and how I practice minimalism as a booktuber. But before I do that, I'm just going to go into a little bit of my minimalist origin story and share with you how I came to this point and junction in my life. So I'll be talking about that. Make sure you stay till the end of the video. I do have a couple of announcements I want to make and to let you guys know what's happening, what's going to be coming up in the next few weeks. Okay, so stay tuned till the end of the video for that. Let's get right to the topics at hand. So the first thing that you really probably want to know is how I became a minimalist. And it's kind of a long story. It's been a long, slow progression in my life to get to the point where I am now. And I've by no means arrived. I'm still on the journey of learning what it means to live a more simple life and be less attached to things. And I first heard the subject brought up in a TED Talk. I do watch quite a few TED Talks. I really enjoy them. And I came across this TED Talk by Josh and Ryan, who are the minimalists. I forget Josh's last name. Why I can't remember his last name, I'll never know. Ryan's last name is Nicodemus, and together they are the minimalists. And you can find their website at theminimalists.com. And they were the first TED Talk that I ever watched that talked about the subject. They have another good friend whose TED Talk I also watched, named Colin Wright. And he's got some famous quirks about his lifestyle and how he initially pursued minimalism in his life, and he has a really interesting story. And I've always been fascinated with smaller spaces and more functional spaces where you don't necessarily have to be in this big, humongous place in order to have room and to have a living space that functions for all of your everyday needs. So yeah, that was my initial exposure to it, and since then I've been really nerdy about it. Right, I've watched tons of videos on the subject. I've read books on the subject, many of which are fascinating. Some are okay. There's a book that I highly recommend called Digital Minimalism. I have reviewed it on the channel, and I'll link it below if you're interested. But just talking about decluttering our digital life and what that means and why it's important. And that is a really, really good book. And I've just slowly been in the process of realizing that I don't need everything that I want, and that's kind of what it boiled down to for me. So it's been a long time in the process. I really had an increasing desire to have the freedom to move about and to travel simply and live simply, uh, and that spills over into my booktube and my book reading goals and things like that. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my origin story, if you will. But it's been several years since I first happened on the subject of minimalism, and now I'm really into a bunch of nerdy stuff around that. I watch minimalist apartment tours on YouTube, and I watch tiny house videos on YouTube, and really all about getting down to the bare roots of simple living and just enjoying life for the experiences you have and not the things in it. The One of the quotes that the minimalists talk about is love people and use things because the opposite never works. And that it's such a simple statement, but it's so true. And so yeah, so that's kind of where I came from in my minimalist journey, and I'm still on the road and learning new ways to adapt my lifestyle to be more simple and more free. So, so you may be wondering what it is about minimalism that really resonates with me. I think the biggest thing, as I've already mentioned, is freedom. Freedom to move about with not much holding me back. Freedom to have experiences that I wouldn't necessarily be able to have if I was spending all my money on things that I may or may not really need. And that that's a big part of it to me. But I've learned about myself that I really value experiences and I value people. And it just allows me a lot of freedom, and it saves me a lot of money too to live a minimalist lifestyle. And it helps me have a healthier outlook on life. And so just the fact that I could live a happy and purposeful life with less just immediately clicked with me, and I said, you know what, that's what I want. I'm not looking to be a monk or anything like that. I'm not looking to sell all of my possessions. I mean, who knows, maybe one day, right? You never know. I'm never going to say never, but I don't think I need to go to that extreme to be happy. I just need to have the things that truly make me happy and that foster experiences with other people. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that too. So you may be wondering what it looks like for me in my personal life, not just specifically my bookish habits, but in general what minimalism looks like for me in my personal life. And there's several things. I realize that I value certain things that help me have experiences. So I do have a fairly good sized board game collection. It's not enormous by any means, but I do have quite a few board games. And I have those games because I value experiencing a game night with people. It's a way for me to connect with other people. We get together and we laugh, and we get competitive with each other and have fun with board games. So I do own several board games, and as a booktuber, I do own several books, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a few minutes. But it also spills over into all of my purchases, right? I find that I make healthier choices for the food that I put into my body. So, it not only impacts my physical life, it impacts my health, and the food choices I make, and figuring out how I can get quality food while not breaking the bank with my grocery bill, right? And so that's one of the areas that it spills over into. I I don't buy that many clothes. I've never been a huge clothes buyer, but every now and again I would see something that I like and I'm like, oh, that looks cool, I'll go and buy it. But I realized it was more or less for how it looked on me versus the function. And what other people might think. Oh, other people will think it will look cool, and so I'm gonna get this shirt because I can. Maybe it's a nerdy shirt and I can show off my fandoms and things like that. But it's showing off to other people, and I began to realize I don't really need that. I still like nerdy shirts; they're cool, but I don't feel like I have to have them. I have a very minimalist wardrobe. I have about 13 or 14 shirts, including one dress shirt, and I do own a couple of ties and things just in case I need to dress a little bit more formally for a job interview or something like that. I own a couple pairs of pants, I own one pair of shoes, or at least one that I wear regularly. I have a pair of dress shoes too, but I hardly ever wear them. So I probably need to think about recycling those. And then, of course, I do have my underwear and stuff like that. So I keep a ready supply of that just because that stuff wears out pretty quick. But I stay pretty minimal. I want to be able to not have to worry about upsizing my living space just because of the things I own when half of them I don't use. And so some of the questions I ask myself are, do I use it? Is it valuable to me? Why is it valuable to me? Do I need it? Those are some of the questions that I ask myself. And, it all boils down to, does it bring me happiness? And if it doesn't, I probably don't need it. And I just, so many things can be bought digitally nowadays too. That's another thing that I do in my personal life is I buy pretty much anything that I can. If I really feel like I want to own it, I buy it digitally. Movies, music. I do pay for Apple Music because I use it on a regular basis. But it allows me to not have to have a CD collection or a vinyl collection or things like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just don't feel like I need it because I can enjoy the music in whatever format it's in. So I just buy it digitally. Same with movies. Same with some video games. And the same is true for books. And I will talk about that here in a few minutes as well. But I buy as much as I can digitally unless I really feel like I need to own it in a physical format. Board games, I can't really buy those digitally. Well, you can, but it doesn't have the same effect. I don't know, it's just kind of weird. I enjoy digital games, but I prefer board games to be on the table and interacting in a physical space with other human beings. So, and if you have more questions on some of these things that I maybe didn't answer in my summaries here, feel free to leave me questions in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer more questions and dialogue with you there. So now we're going to get into another topic that I want to talk about, which is resources that I recommend. And after this, we'll get into the Q&A part of the video. So I hope you're enjoying this so far. Make sure to click a like if you're getting value out of it. And some of the resources that I highly recommend are can be found online. In visual format, whether it's on YouTube or on Netflix. There's documentaries. Two documentaries that I find really highly valuable are two documentaries by the Minimalists, Josh and Ryan. The first one is just called Minimalism, and it's kind of an introduction to them and their story, and talking about their values and beliefs around a minimalist lifestyle. And then they recently came out with another documentary, a follow-up documentary. It just released this year, actually in 2021, and it's called Less Is Now. Both of them are produced by Matt D'Avella, who is another minimalist that I follow. He has a YouTube channel that I follow very regularly. Absolutely love his videos. His content is amazing, and I really think you should check out Matt D'Avella too. And I'll leave all these links in the description below as well so that you can check them out. Another YouTuber that I really enjoy is Vera over at Simple Happy Zen. So she has a lot of minimalist content. She makes a lot of great decluttering videos, and she just talks about how minimalism impacts her life and how it impacts her choices, and things that she no longer buys and things that she still buys. So she does a lot of great videos around decluttering and living a more minimalist lifestyle. And she's just a really sweet person altogether. So I highly recommend you check out her channel. And then I've also already recommended Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. And I'll leave a link down below where you can grab a hold of that book, and you'll be able to see my book review on the book if you'd like to. And there's other really great books as well. There's The Joy of Less, which is another great book. I forget the author's name, but just, a really fantastic book. There are so many great resources out there for helping you become more minimal in your life, if that's what you want. And that's the thing that I want to get across in this is I don't personally believe that everyone has to be a minimalist. I think it's beneficial, but I don't push it on anyone. This is just my own personal beliefs, my own personal practice of life. It brings me more happiness. It brings me more zen and peace in my life. It helps me be more mindful in my daily activities, but I don't push it on anyone because everybody's different. So if you're watching this video and you're like, oh, Chaz, I can never be a minimalist, okay, you don't have to be. But, at the same time, maybe you got some value out of this video, or you can get value out of some of the resources that I suggested that may make you think twice and think, hey, maybe I should give this a try and see what it's like and see what it does for my life. So I really hope that's the case, but ultimately, you do you, I'm going to do me, and we're all going to be happier, right? Right. Okay, so let's get into the Q&A. The first question is, what makes a minimalist? I've kind of already answered this question, what makes me a minimalist anyway, and it's different for everybody. I've followed some really extreme minimalists who only own everything that will fit in their backpack. And maybe it's a really large travel backpack, but it's still a backpack, and that's all they own. Colin Wright, that I mentioned before, who's a friend of Josh and Ryan, friend of the Minimalists, he started out his minimalist journey getting rid of everything except what he could carry in 2 bags or 3 bags. I think it was 2 bags and a backpack, if I'm not mistaken. And he traveled all over with just those 3 items that held all of his personal possessions. So you can go to extremes. There's a really good book, and I forgot to mention this in my resources, but there's a book called Goodbye Things by Fumio Sasaki. And he's an extreme minimalist. He doesn't really own anything except for a few small items. But he rents a furnished apartment and everything. He doesn't really need much, but His book, Goodbye Things, is really, really good. I've listened to it several times, and I definitely highly recommend it. There's some other great books out there on Hygge, the Danish philosophy of having a cozy lifestyle, which has a lot of minimalist aspects to it. So the point is, everybody does it a little bit differently. So what makes me a minimalist might not make you a minimalist. You might do it differently than I am. And so it really depends on the person. But there are some general factors that describe a minimalist. And that would be someone who is focused on being more intentional with their purchases, or being more intentional with what they own. Someone who values experiences over things. Someone who bases all of their purchases and things they own around the things that they value, so they've really narrowed down what their core values are in life and what they expect to get from life. Those are some things that characterize a minimalist, but that looks different for everyone. So I can't really give you an answer to what makes a minimalist, because you gotta do you. Okay, so let's get on to the next question. Do you prefer an e-reader to avoid excess books? Yes, I actually do. I have said that most of the books on my bookshelf I won't continue to own for the long term. There's a few that I will. I'm very, very enamored by certain books. Some of my most favorite books in the entire world, I will do my very best to always own a physical copy of. That includes most of Neil Gaiman's books. I'm a huge Neil Gaiman fan. And, it includes the Night Circus, and it includes The Ocean at the End of the Lane, and it includes The Lord of the Rings, and I have really nice editions of The Silmarillion and some of J.R.R. Tolkien's other books. Things like that are things that I really enjoy and value, and I have illustrated editions of Neverwhere and of Ocean at the End of the Lane. I have illustrated editions of them, and so those are really beautiful and timeless pieces on my bookshelf that mean a lot to me. So I own physical copies of those, but the majority of my books I buy on Kindle, and I do that for several reasons. Number one, it's much less expensive. You can almost always find some really great deals on ebooks, and popular ones. Some of the really popular ones go on sale all the time. And so it's helpful to me to be able to save money when I'm buying books. And it also means it's not going to clutter up my bookshelf, because I don't have to keep buying more and more bookshelves to house all the books that I own, because they're on my Kindle, they're on my e-readers. So, most of the books on my e-reader, I don't feel like I need to own a physical copy of. The majority of the time I'm reading on my Kindle, because it's easier on my eyes too. So there's a lot of reasons having an e-reader makes sense for me. And most minimalists that you talk to, if they're into books, they probably own a Kindle or another e-reader of some kind, because it is just more practical. And it's helpful when you're moving too, and I moved several times, unfortunately. It's helpful when you move, because you're not having to constantly pack up tons of books to move with you everywhere you go. So it is quite nice. But even some of the books that you see on my bookshelf here, I may not always own the physical copies of those books, because once I've read them, I may unhaul them or donate them to a used bookstore so somebody else can get value out of it. And that's kind of how I go about that. So yes, an e-reader is very important to me in my minimalist book reading journey. What made you choose minimalism? Well, and I've kind of already talked about that at the beginning of my video. I chose minimalism for the simplicity and the peace it brings me, and to avoid being so fixed on consuming things as opposed to consuming experiences. So, and I did it to save money. I did it for various different reasons. So that was what made me choose minimalism. Question number 4. Aren't dragons hoarders by nature? And do you consider yourself a minimalist dragon? This was a question by my friend Andrew. I'll link his channel down below too. And Andrew's Wizardly Reads. This was a great question. I got a huge kick out of it. Yes, dragons are hoarders by nature. But in this modern day where dragons just, it's more expensive to own a big place to put all your hoard. And so I think dragons in this day and age probably would read, would have less stuff. I think dragons would be minimalists. Maybe. I can't speak for dragons really. They do their own thing and they do what they do. So I do consider myself a minimalist dragon. Is that weird? I have a dragon complex. Yeah. So that, I guess that would make me a minimalist dragon. But I'm wearing human skin. Because people might be scared if they saw a dragon, just walking around in the city and going to the mailbox and stuff like that. So I keep my human skin on. Yeah. Shh. Don't tell anyone. If so, what sorcery did you use to achieve this? Well, now, Andrew, if I told you how I achieved it, then I'm afraid I would have to kill you. I just, or if I'm a dragon, does that mean I'd have to eat you? Anyway, we won't go there. I just know I keep my sorceress ways to myself. What tips do you have from living a minimalist life effectively? So, I think one of the big things that helped me is I sat down at the beginning and I made lists of the things that were most important to me. I set down my core values, the things that mean the most to me, and I use that as a guide. But you start off simply. Maybe you look around and you make a list of things that you're always thinking about how you should use it more, and you just never do. Maybe that's an item that you need to get rid of. Start off small, and you can donate it. You can donate it to your local Goodwill or whatever that might be. So that's kind of how I did it. I started off small. I didn't push too hard because it was important not to overwhelm myself with getting rid of things all at once. So that would be my recommendation. Start off slow. Don't feel like you have to become a minimalist overnight. Take it easy. Don't be too hard on yourself if you are going back and forth on an item that you feel like you had initially decided to get rid of and now you can't part with it. Don't be hard on yourself. It's really okay. If you just can't get rid of that item right now, don't. And if it's a book that really means a lot to you and you're having a hard time getting rid of it, maybe it's not the time to get rid of it, and maybe it never will be. That's the thing. Don't judge yourself based on what other people do. You do you, and be the minimalist that works best for you. And that would be my advice to embracing a more minimalist lifestyle. Is your decision to be a minimalist based on an opinion regarding modern day consumerism, or is it more to feel peace in your personal life? This is a great question, and this was posed to me by my friend Allie over at the channel Book Binge. She's a very, very thoughtful booktuber. She thinks deeply about a lot of issues, and I really appreciate her content. And one video that she did was on consumerism in the booktube community, and I'll leave a link to that below because I think it's a really, really valuable and meaningful discussion. But she posed this question to me, and it's kind of both. I did do it to feel more peace in my daily life and to be more simplistic and to not have a lot of clutter and just to be more happy in life. But I also did it because I noticed that our culture is so steeped in consumerism, and you're constantly being bombarded with commercials of things that you need to buy, and here's what this other person has over here, so I need to have it too. And there is a lot of that in the booktube community. There's lots of people have tons of books, and I can easily look at one person's book collection and say, oh man, I need to go buy more books, otherwise I'm not fulfilling my duty as a booktuber. But that's the thing, we don't need to keep consuming and consuming more things that just take up more space and then cause us to have to upgrade the size of our houses and things like that. So I did it for various different reasons. Consumerism is a big deal, and I really want to go against the grain with that and prove to myself, first and foremost, that I don't need a lot of stuff to be happy, and I don't need a lot of books to be a quality booktuber. But also too, I kind of feel like it's the direction that our society needs to go to move ahead and to have progress and really, honestly, to keep existing. I think in a lot of ways consumerism is becoming a really big detriment to our society. So yeah, so it's both. Yeah. So next question. Number 8, do you find minimalism has enriched your life, and how? It really has. And I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'm just much more happy. I'm not constantly feeling like I have to own a bunch of things, or I'm not feeling like I have to compare myself to a lot of people. I don't feel like I'm having to keep up with the Joneses. I just do my thing. I do me, and it's made me less worried about what other people think too, because if somebody doesn't like what I do or like who I am, that's great. They don't have to. I am perfectly happy with who I am and where I'm at, and it's made me less critical of myself and less worried about what other people think of me too. So it's done a lot for me mentally, as well as cutting down on my living space. With a smaller living space comes less rent, less cost for utilities, a whole bunch of different things. So yeah, it's been really valuable to me. Any tips for decluttering your life to start the transition to a minimalist life? Oh, this is an interesting one, and I thought about this long and hard about what I would do for recommendations on this. The first thing is it starts with mindset. I mean, it really does. Retraining your mind about what your needs are versus your wants. That's a big one. So it starts with your mindset, and then there are various ways to go about starting the process. I mentioned before about taking baby steps. Take it slow. Just do one or two things at a time. Uh, Josh and Ryan, the minimalists, they did a packing party. And what that is, they basically packed up all their things, and they labeled them in boxes, so they packed everything up like they were moving, and then they set it aside, and then as they needed things, they would go and unpack it. And what they came to realize is they really didn't unpack anything, because the things that they had saved out in the packing party were the things that they used most often on a daily basis. And then there would be occasional times where they would just, go to maybe one or two boxes out of the 20 or so boxes that they had to get things out. But it helped them to realize that, you know what? Most of the stuff I owned, I never used. And so they ended up donating a lot of that stuff. So you could do a packing party if you want to. Maybe that feels more extreme to you, and if so, don't do it. There's other ways to do it. But one way to really get in your mind what's most valuable to you is do a mock fire drill. Pretend that you have 5 minutes to get out of the building before the fire consumes everything, and you have to choose what you're going to grab and take with you out the door. Now, I wouldn't recommend running down the steps once you get out of your house or apartment and say, fire, fire. I wouldn't recommend that. That tends to freak people out, and that, the police and the fire department tend to frown on that sort of thing. So don't do that. But in your mind, just tell you, okay, there's a fire. What am I going to take? I have 5 minutes to do it. And that right there will tell you exactly what it is you value most. Exactly what you value most. I would take my phone so I have a way to contact somebody. I would take the clothes on my back, which hopefully I do have clothes on my back at the time. Let's hope that's the case. I don't want to run out there naked. Otherwise, I'm going to have to take time to put up clothes on. And of course, I'm going to grab my kids. So, I've got my phone, probably my car keys, my clothes on my back, and my kids. As long as they're with me, that's all that matters. I can replace everything else. I could literally replace my phone if I had to, so I probably don't need my phone, but I would take it probably if I could. So do that, create a mock fire drill in your head and say, okay, what do I absolutely need to get out the door with me in 5 minutes? Or maybe you can make it a little bit longer to give yourself an opportunity to pick a few other things that you really like and enjoy and bring you happiness. So maybe you do a vacate the premises drill. You have an hour to vacate the premises because your landlord has just evicted you, and you have an hour to choose the things that are most valuable to you, because you don't have time to pack and find another place to live. So you're going to pretty much have to get rid of everything that you own, and the landlord will probably do it for you. So you have an hour to decide what it is you're going to take that you absolutely need to have a happy and fulfilled life. And there's other ways to do it too. You can create all sorts of scenarios that will help you eliminate things that maybe you don't really need. And maybe you look around your life and you say, hey, most of the stuff in my life I use on a daily basis. And that is great for you. If you use it, don't get rid of it. It's totally up to you. And those are just some suggestions on how you could go about decluttering. But, there's many others. There's the Marie Kondo method. A lot of people have talked about the Kondo method, and set aside different piles. This pile of things sparks joy, and this pile of things doesn't. So I'm going to say goodbye to these things and thank them for the time that they were in my life, but I'm going to keep these things over here that really spark joy. There's so many methods. You just kind of have to find one that works for you, and maybe none of those work for you, and you have to find your own path, and that's cool. And the last question is, as a minimalist, do you have any favorite books? Or books you could not part with? So I do have favorite books, yes. I've talked about The Ocean at the End of the Lane. That's my most favorite book of all time. My second favorite of all time is The Night Circus. I absolutely love those books. I own physical copies of them. I hope to always continue to own physical copies of them. Lord of the Rings, Neverwhere, a bunch of Neil Gaiman books. I have lots of books that mean a lot to me. But if push came to shove, there is not one book on my bookshelf that I could not part with. I could always buy it again. And that's the thing, that's where minimalism has really impacted me, is it's made me realize, you know something? If I lose all my stuff today, if we have a fire and I get out and my kids are alive and I'm alive, I can replace things. You can replace things. You can't replace people. So you gotta decide what's most important to you in your life. At the end of the day, I can replace every single one of the books on my bookshelf, and maybe, if they were all gone, I might only replace one or two. Who knows? It's hard to say. Hopefully I'll never be in that position, but if I am, I could do without most of the books on my bookshelf. Eventually I will probably pare down to a shelf or two of books that are really the most valuable to me, and the rest I'll be donating. But it remains to be seen, because I'm still in progress with my journey. But yeah, there are no books on my bookshelf that I say I can never part with that book, because I could. I could part with anything in my life. And it's about realizing that life is fleeting. We're not guaranteed tomorrow, and if something happens to me today, I'm not going to take anything with me wherever the next step is. Once I've reintegrated myself into the universe, whatever that is, I'm not going to have need of any of these possessions, and so it's just a temporary valuable that does bring me happiness, but it's still temporary happiness. So I hope that this video has been valuable to you. I know it's been a long and drawn out video. Feel free to ask me more questions in the comments below, and stay tuned for my future videos. I am going to be doing a live discussion with Allie from Book Binge on the 17th. We're going to be discussing books versus authors. We're going to be discussing cancel culture. So that should be interesting and fun, and I hope you'll join us for that. You'll see more information about that if you follow me on the socials and you click the notification bell on my channel. You'll get notifications for that. My next solo video on my channel, where it'll just be me, is going to be my review of the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. I recently finished it and I can't wait to talk about it with you. I'm going to do both a spoiler-free and a spoiler-filled video of that, so stay tuned for that. And I think that about wraps it up. I thank you so much for sticking around and watching this video. Make sure that you are reading more books, guys. Until next time, I'm Chaz, signing off. Have a fantastic weekend.